And welcome back here to the MLB Hot Stove Daily. My name is Michael. Thank you guys for joining us here at the Upside Sports Network. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if this is your first time joining us. We really appreciate having you join aboard or come on board. You can follow us over on X at UpsideSN to know when we do go live. We'll post that there as well. And on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Welcome in, Jordan. Appreciate those of you who are returning. We're going to wrap up our series as far as creating the perfect trade deadline. Tonight we're going to focus on a number of different teams, a couple of different headlines that are out there as well, some injury notes, and some trade rumors coming out of the Tampa Bay Rays, courtesy of Jon Heyman. But first, let's start with getting into some of the news that we saw today. The one injury piece of news that I did see is that Josiah Gray for the Nationals is going to be down. He just had UCL surgery. Bright spot for the Nationals. Really kind of spearheaded this turnaround for them on the mound. They got C.J. Abrams, of course, in the infield. But as far as an injury note, that's one big one that I'm paying attention to, not just for this year, but I'm looking at the future of the Nationals and how many good young pieces they have on that roster, how their young starters are kind of coming along over the last year. Josiah Gray probably the best among that group, and unfortunately he's going to be out for a significant period of time. Hope he gets well soon. News and notes now. We're going to go quickly here. The Tampa Bay Rays, courtesy of Jon Heyman, are listening and actively talking about Randy Arozarena, Zach Eflin. They're also talking about Isaac Paredes, Yandy Diaz. There's a number of pieces that could be moved. Latrell could be moved out of that rotation. Fairbanks out of the bullpen. Jeffrey Springs is on the table as well. There's a number of pieces that sound like they are on the board to be moved here at the trade deadline. With so few teams willing to sell at this year's deadline, the Rays could really do a great job cleaning up on all the talent. These other teams are going to have to pony up if they want that top level talent from the Tampa Bay Rays. They're going to have to pay through the nose for it, and the Rays might reap the reward for that. Welcome in Chicago. Cubs are falling apart. I wouldn't say they're falling apart. They haven't really found their stride, to put it mildly. Just like my Rangers, anyway, another team that really hasn't found their stride this year. Neither one of them is really out of it at this point. The Rangers are only 5.5 games back after dropping the opener, anyway, in their series against the Baltimore Orioles, 9-1. Eovaldi gave up 3 two-run home runs in that one. Really decided the game. The offense continues to be the issue for the Rangers. But once again, they really didn't show up. For the Chicago Cubs, it's just nothing seems to be clicking at any one time. So, one game they might get a great pitching performance, but then they can't hit the ball out of the infield. They start mashing a few homers, then they give up a few more homers to the other team. It's just when one part of their team seems to be rolling well, the other teams seem to or the other parts of the team seem to be falling apart. And that's kind of how they've been up and down with their performance this year. Right now, they're in the cellar in the NL Central. I think there's still a chance, an outside chance anyway, that they get to the wild card. I don't think they sell here at the deadline, but I certainly don't think they move towards big-time targets out there at the trade deadline, like Paredes, among others. Paredes, though, could be a play for the future at third base, so we shall see. Bichette also strained his calf again today, but he will be out for 1 to 2 weeks. That's a tough one for the Blue Jays. I don't think they were going to move him anyway. I think that discussion was probably better to be had after the season. They have other fish that they need to fry first. They primarily need to figure out what they're going to do with some of their starters that they have in that rotation. Things just have not worked out the way things that they had hoped anyway that they would there in Toronto. They remind me a lot of the way the Chicago White Sox really looked, say, 2-3 years ago. They looked like a team that was going to be a World Series favorite in the American League. Ultimately, they just never really capitalized on the talent that they had, and ultimately sold off a bunch of the talent, and the other pieces that they had ultimately proved to not be as valuable as the rest of the industry thought. You look at the Toronto Blue Jays, they're in very much the same boat right now. They spent all this money to bring in Barrios, Springer, among others. They drafted well as far as bringing in Bo Bichette, etc., but they haven't really kept that pipeline going. They've gotten some nice contributions from the minor leagues, from a couple of different spots, but they've had to invest heavily in that starting rotation, and it just hasn't worked. They haven't had a true ace in that rotation. Gosman's been decent in that role, but there's nobody that you're pointing to and saying, hey, he's better than the other team's number one on any given night. And the Blue Jays just kind of twisting in the wind here. And it's just not working out. Vlad Guerrero's at the end of his contract here, 1 year left after this one. He could be a nice prize here in the market. If somebody's willing to pony up for a Yandy Diaz, maybe they want more of a power bat and go to Toronto and go for the power bat there in Vlad Guerrero Jr. But I believe Yandy Diaz is probably the more available of the first baseman on the market right now. I would have thought before the season Pete Alonso would have been a great target here at the trade deadline. The Mets, though, are pretty much cemented in there at the wild card. Really like what they've done this year, and they could actually have a little bit of room for improvement. Now, I'm not saying this is a year where they should try to win the series or anything like that, but it's been a nice surprise after such a tough year last year for the Mets, for them to have this nice bounce-back season. So let us know in the comments section what you think of the news of the day, that the Tampa Bay Rays are listing and actively talking about a number of different players on their roster. You think back to other trade deadlines in the past, the Rays were always considered the favorite to make a wild card run or win the division in the American League East. Not so this year. They could, of course, make a run and win the wild card. Even after they make some of these trades, they still have an outside shot of that happening. But I think they realize the writing's on the wall that they're not winning the division. Even if they did win the wild card, they're not doing anything when they get to the playoffs. And more than likely, they're not winning the wild card, even as currently constructed. So they're going to dismantle this one a little bit, retool a little bit. But the one issue teams are going to have to be wary of when they're trading with the with the Tampa Bay Rays is that most often the Rays actually win every single trade that they make. What I mean by that, they seem to get more value than what they ultimately give up. They capitalize on a number of different pieces that maybe you don't value as highly as the Rays do, but the Rays see something that they could possibly utilize. You think back to all the different trades that they've really got. Look at just the pieces on their roster that they got from the Texas Rangers. We'll focus on Jeffrey Springs and Pete Fairbanks. You think back to the trade of Nick Solak, good second base prospect that ultimately went to Texas. Looked like he had a future there in Texas for about a year, and then it just kind of fell apart. Obviously, Texas hoped things would work out better for Nick Solak. Ultimately, it didn't. He's obviously no longer with the club, has been gone from the team for over a year now. The piece that they gave away, though, is still there and still performing there in Tampa Bay, and they've gotten some great results out of Fairbanks and Springs. Springs was a part of the Rangers at one point as well. There's some significant talent that they've done a great job of bringing in and developing that other teams might have not seen as keenly as the Rays have. So keep that in mind. If you're willing to make a deal with the Rays for a Paredes or a Diaz, maybe you're getting a better known asset in return. You worry about the age for Diaz, how much longer he's going to be at this level of production. He's, 30, 32, somewhere in there. He's a first baseman by trade right now, high average guy. But average right now is a little bit of a rare skill set in the majors. A team like the Astros really would love to have a player like that. They lead the entire league right now in batting average as a team, and bringing him in would only continue their path to success. First base has been their biggest hole in their lineup for the better part of the last 3 years. Then you look at the other pieces that the Rays could move. Paredes, he's signed for at least 2 more years after this one. Of course, you can try to extend him. Significant value. He's going to bring in over 50 value anyway on baseball trade values. Those are the pieces that we need to be paying attention to. And then, of course, Zach Eflin in that rotation. I think the Rays would like to save the money on him and recoup some of the value by trading him away elsewhere. So keep the Rays in front of mind here as we get closer to the trade deadline. The other team I'm going to be getting into at the beginning of next week is the Texas Rangers. Depending on how their weekend series goes with the Orioles, it could really dictate how the front office views this team going into the trade deadline. They're really going to have some cookies after the Orioles. They're going to be facing the White Sox for 4, the Blue Jays for 3, and then they're going to have 1 against the St. Louis Cardinals before the trade deadline. Ultimately, though, this Orioles series, I believe, is going to dictate quite a bit as far as where the Rangers are at. They currently sit 5.5 games back. They'll probably finish today 5 back of a first-place tie between the Astros and Mariners atop the division. But this is a real opportunity for Texas to cement themselves as, hey, we won the World Series last year. We're back. We're getting healthy. Our offense is starting to improve and turn it around. Ultimately, coming out of the break, they were a little rusty. They looked much like they did the entire first half, anemic offensively. Pitching, Eovaldi didn't necessarily look awful, but he did give up 3 home runs. Just didn't have the sharpest location on some of those pitches today, and ultimately it cost him. We'll see if they're able to rebound and win games 2 and 3. I believe they have Scherzer going on the mound tomorrow night. So we'll see how the Rangers fare there. We'll be live for you guys again on Monday night. Make sure you guys join us for that one. And we'll kind of break down where the races are at with the standings. We'll also get into the Texas Rangers, who either will be buying or selling here at the deadline. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to be stuck in the middle. They're going to have to offload some of those guys on the 40-man roster anyway, so it's going to be a very active trade deadline for the Rangers, no matter which way this series ultimately goes with the Orioles. Alrighty, let's go ahead and flip it over to baseballtradevalues.com. We're going to kind of go through these teams quickly. We'll start in the NL Central. We'll go with the Milwaukee Brewers first. What would constitute a perfect trade deadline for them? Well, they need pitching. They need to add some arms to that rotation and to that bullpen. Let's see what some of you guys are floating out there. There we go. Chisholm, not seeing that one happen. Anderson makes a little bit of sense. I like that one. Fetty makes some sense as well. Devin Williams going out the door. Unless they surprise us like they did with Josh Hader a couple years ago, I don't believe that's happening. The money for Eflin, I don't think that's happening. But Flaherty does make some sense to me. I think they would rather go with guys that have some, not necessarily significant control, like 3-4 years control, but at least somebody who's going to be around the team after this year as well. They've already done a nice job beefing up that rotation a little bit around the periphery, bringing in Savali among others. Um, Bednar for Mitchell. I like that ad as far as a bullpen addition. I'm not necessarily saying Bednar is the perfect fit here, but not a bad one either. Flaherty again. Flaherty, Flaherty, Flaherty. A lot of Brewers fans targeting Flaherty here. Scoball, Berger, and Luzardo. Luzardo's around 5 ERA. I don't think that's happening, although they could try to capitalize on his value being low. Jackson Holiday, no way you're getting that. Fetty makes some sense. Casey Mize actually does make some sense from the Tigers. Finnegan as a bullpen option, I like that. Severino, not happening. Sewald, not happening. We'll go to the third page here and just kind of check the top line items. Adames and Williams out, no. Littell makes some sense from the Rays. Okay. Let's go ahead and make this trade. Go to the simulator. 2-team trade. Brewers are the first team. I want to look at the Rays, what the value is for Littell. I just want to know where they value him on this site. I haven't looked at that in a while. Springs 15, Littell 1 year left after this year. Very low salary, but it does sound like he's the most available of the Rays starters. 13 value. Let's go ahead and look at the Brewers prospect pool real quick. There they are. I don't think they're really going to give up anybody huge out of their system, but they're probably going to have to give up somebody in this 10 to 15 range if they want to bring in Littell, give them another starter for next year as well. Jorge Quintana makes some sense as a 17-year-old, hitting 226. Still so young, though. Is he the best shortstop option that they have? No, they got two shortstops ahead of him. One behind, a 20-year-old. He's not performing much better either. Okay. Let's build this trade here. We're going to keep it simple. We're just going to do one piece. Littell for now. Remember, they just made the trade of Savali. So they are familiar with each other's systems. Terang, Mizrowski, Perkins. I don't think you're getting any of those. Mitchell, I think, is probably your best case scenario. I don't think that's happening. You're not trading Savali back, obviously. Brown was their number 10. Okay. So it looks like they don't value those shortstops very highly. There's Quintana and Giarte, 1.9 each. Not happening. Okay, so Quintana, we're going to go ahead and send him. Low cost option here. Welcome in Sub-Zero. Who should win the AL MVP? Judge or Adley? Right now, I'm probably leaning Judge. Just slightly, though. Adley as a catcher, though, just kind of impacts the game in more ways than Judge does, just because he's able to touch the ball on every single pitch. All right, looking back up here at the top end pieces, Rodriguez. I don't see him on here. Outfield prospect and Young. They need to beef up their position player group there in Tampa Bay. And so I think we could see more of a... Mitchell does make some sense. 4.5 left. They have a ton of outfield prospects as well. Wimmer as well. I'm going to go ahead and say the front line piece of this one is going to be Mitchell. I think. Not so confident about that one. Let me look at what his numbers look like, though. Brewers. Mitchell's only played 10 games at the major league level this year. 192 average. Is he injured? Just recently started playing at the major league level. 10 games, though. I'm not sure that the Rays would want him as an injury risk. Let's take him out of the trade. Let's go with instead. We'll go with 2 here, I believe. What do they value Wilkin at? I don't see him on this list. Okay. Wimmer makes some sense as well. Not on here. Brewers. Wimmer. Only 26 at bats, a 154 average. He's in the minors right now. Let's look at his minors numbers this year. AAA hitting 249. Diminished prospect status. That's not going to get you Littell, but he's the only piece that could fit if they really saw something. I just don't see a fit here. Square peg, round hole, I guess. Alright, let's go ahead and put Wimmer in the deal, though. I really liked him as a piece last year for the Brewers. Maybe they view him as a Rosarania replacement. But I think if you put him in here, because of the diminished numbers this year so far, you'd have to include another piece. We'll go ahead and throw in another outfielder, Jose Anderson. Low cost. Not on their top 30. Okay. Not a bad deal. Let's look at it at the top. Wimmer's value is only 7.2. Makes some sense. Littell's at 13. Let's do second baseman Valero here to round out this trade. This would be a pretty good return for the Rays. If I were to say the perfect trade deadline scenario for the Rays, this type of return for Littell, I would love it. Now for the Brewers, does this really set them back? I think the loss of the young talent coming out of their system would really hurt for them. I think they would rather lose a bigger piece and have to give up less rather than having to go the quantity approach here. Let's go ahead and scrap this one. All right. One other team I wanted to look at here again is the Colorado Rockies. We're going to look at the starting pitchers. Majors. All right. We're going to keep this trade fairly simple. We did a 2-for-1 deal before, actually a 3-for-1 deal anyway. Gomber, Quantrill, and Beeks. We put them all in a trade earlier for another team, but I think a great trade here for the Brewers would be to get one of Gomber or Quantrill. Quantrill, I think, has some good talent left in there. Great arm for the Guardians at one point. Now has shown it once again for the Rockies. I want to look at his numbers real quick just to kind of see where he's at. We're going to go with the pitching. We're going to go with the Rockies. Quantrill, 4.15 ERA, 108 innings. And that's what I'm looking for right there, is the innings from Quantrill. Looking at him just to see if there's any news. Looks good, and he's going to start tomorrow night. Probably going to be his final start, honestly, for the Rockies. I think he's going to very likely be moved here in the next week. I think he could be one of the arms that moves first, just to kind of set the market for what the rest of the arms could be worth here at the deadline. So, let's go back over to the Brewers. 1.5 cost. Rockies are looking for significant talent. They're not necessarily looking for it to be close. So we'll go all the way down here to the bottom. We're going to do Anderson, 1.5 to 1.9. We're going to go to page 4. And we're going to throw in a young starter, 18-year-old starter. Validate the trade, pretty fair trade. I'm going to go ahead and post this one. We'll do the Cardinals next here in just a moment. All right. So what we're trying to do is create the perfect trade deadline for each one of these teams that we've already done. You guys saw us start with the Mariners. We went through the Astros. Any one of the contenders on the American League side, we already got those done. We're going to kind of finish that series up. So with this trade here, the Brewers add another starter. They've already beefed up their rotation a little bit, bringing in Savali and a couple other arms already before the deadline. This, I think, kind of continues that trend for them. Now, is this year's goal to win the World Series? Let's be realistic. No. More than likely, they're hoping to win the division, and that's kind of where their hopes are right now. Bringing in Quantrill helps stabilize that rotation, gives them some consistent innings, saves the bullpen a little bit, and Quantrill really brings a level of professionalism for a lot of those young guys on that team. They are a very young, youthful team that's going to have to figure out how to win in September as their games get tougher, the races get tighter, dog days of summer, all that kind of thing. Quantrill will be a good veteran in that clubhouse to help with those kinds of things. 28 years old, a year away from free agency. He's looking to make an impact on a Brewers team that's looking to lock down this division against a very tough opponent in the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the return for the Rockies, getting a couple of young players, a 17-year-old outfielder, 18-year-old starting pitcher. Neither one of these guys the Brewers are counting on as a future MVP or anything like that. That's why their value is so low. But they do get two decent prospects that they can wish upon. For the Brewers, only giving up that level of talent and not costing yourself some upper level minor league talent is a really good acquisition by the Brewers to add a major league starter, probably your number 3 or 4 in your rotation as currently constructed. Could be higher depending on how he settles in there in Milwaukee. But to give you that length out of that rotation, love this return, love this trade for the Brewers. This is their perfect trade deadline. Like I just said, we're going to get into the Cardinals. Sarah, I hope you're joining us right now. I know you're a huge fan of your St. Louis Cardinals. All right, Jack Flaherty going back to the Cardinals. I don't see that happening, but they do need some starting pitching. Pilar makes some sense. Anderson makes some sense. It's kind of a depth piece in the outfield for them, and Anderson plugs into that rotation nicely. Estevez makes some sense plugging into that bullpen. For the outfield, bringing in Robert, I'm not sure the acquisition cost is worth it for them. Moving on from Jordan Walker, who's struggling in the minor leagues to some extent, just feels like you're giving up on him a little too soon for a piece like Robert. For Fetty, though, that's a nice acquisition for them. I think he'd be a nice target for them to try to acquire here at the trade deadline. Flaherty again, no. Carlson on the way out could make some sense. Wu would be a great addition for the Cardinals. There was some heat before the season as far as the Cardinals and Mariners linking up on a trade. The idea, though, would have been to send Nolan Gorman, among others, to Seattle in exchange for Logan Gilbert. Obviously, Gilbert's profile is really elevated. That's no longer going to happen. Best case scenario the Cardinals could hope for is Wu. Gotta like this type of move for the Cardinals. Gets them a good, young starting pitching in their rotation, but they lose Nootbaar to do it. Mariners need to add some offense, and they would do so in that type of a trade. Not a bad trade overall, but honestly, for a perfect trade deadline, I think the Cardinals would prefer to hold on to Nootbaar. Gosman exchanged for Matz and Roby. I would not do that if I'm the Cardinals or the Blue Jays. For the Cardinals, they get Robert. Again, I just don't see him really fitting. John Gray would be a nice addition if the Rangers move him. Like that one. All right, let's get into the trade. We're going to do a two-team trade. We're going to try to keep this one simple. Remember, 2-for-1 type trades are very difficult to pull off because selling teams try to maximize the talent that they're acquiring in return for the piece that they're selling at the deadline. So keep that in mind that if you're trying to stack, say, a reliever from one team and a starter, not only are you going to have to give up the value of what that starter is on the open market and what the reliever is on the open market, but you're going to have to give them a little bit of a sweetener so that they don't go elsewhere and trade him to some other team. So keep that in mind. The Cardinals do have a lot that they could use here at the deadline as far as different avenues that they could go. I like the idea of the Angels, but for me, this one has Zach Eflin written all over it and in spades. I mean, he just fits the type of pitcher that the Cardinals really need. High innings guy. Really like what he could do in that rotation, and the money is a little bit cheaper for them to be able to take rather than the Rays, where they need to be a little bit more frugal. So let's see what the trade could look like. Eflin, if I remember correctly, is valued around 13. They got him up to 17 at this point. We're going to keep it simple. We're just going to put Eflin in there. We're not going to try to stack an outfielder or add a reliever or anything like that. We're looking for around 17. So let's scroll it down here. Herrera is probably the highest piece. Walker, probably the highest one as well. I don't think they move either one of those pieces for Eflin. Matthews, probably their best pitching prospect right now. I don't think they move him either. Roby could make some sense as a guy going out the door to kind of headline a trade. Cooper could make some sense as another starting pitcher who could help them out. And I think that might be the direction I want to go. This does get them kind of a good starting pitcher to hope upon. They really need to help with their position player group, though. They're always looking to acquire catchers, so Bernal makes some sense. He's only 20. He'll be the real get for them at this trade. Let's just see what those two pieces do so far. Hertby and Bernal go for Eflin, and you still have roughly 8 that you can bring in. You could finish this trade off with a Roby. I would try to do something different, though, because I wouldn't want to give him up. Ciani makes some sense. Let me look at the Cardinals hitters real quick. Herrera's played in 54 games, 3 homers, 279 average. Nice. Ciani in center. Played 87 games, a 227 average. This could be a typical Rays candidate, seeing something that in a player that they could maximize on their own roster. Young player. I kind of like that one. Victor Scott hasn't played much out there in center. He is their starting center fielder, or at least has played 87 games as a center fielder this year. Let's look at his numbers. I just want to see what he's done lately. 227 this year. Last 7 games hitting 200. Dog days of summer, I guess, starting to affect him, or at least winding down before the All-Star break. Not huge value. I'm not sure he could be the biggest piece in this deal. Let's go ahead and hold him out. I think they have found their shortstop of the future, though. Victor Scott could make some sense. As much as I don't want to do it, I think Roby would have to be the headliner of this package going out. And that gets you, I think this would get you Zach Eflin. You think of what they traded last year, Montgomery, Stratton in exchange for 3 minor league pieces. Roby probably being the best of that group. Oof. To me, I think Roby has a chance to be a very good starter. Gunnar for MVP, I don't think he wins it. Yankees need help, but they won today. Soto 4 for 4, like what I saw. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and make this deal. Validate trade, post trade. Remember, the idea here is to come up with the perfect trade deadline for these teams. In this scenario, we're thinking we're the Cardinals. What would we want here at the deadline? You want a guy who's going to start a playoff game for you in Eflin, and that's exactly what you get. Cost certainty for next year as well. They needed to add some starting pitching for next year. Lance Lynn, etc., not going to be around, so they need somebody to take some innings. Eflin would be a great piece there. They do give up a number of young pieces out of their system, but nobody besides Roby, I believe anyway, that's going to make a huge difference to their future. Let us know what you guys think. Cardinals get a starting pitcher that takes the ball probably in game 3 for them, maybe game 2. Rays get a starting pitcher who's probably going to help them out, not this year, but probably next year towards the end of the year. A catcher that they need to strengthen their position player group a little bit. Another starting pitcher that they can hope upon as well. I get a whole bunch of Rays fans in the comments of these trades anyway, saying they don't need starting pitching, they need position player group, or they need position player talent in the minor leagues. And sure, I mean, they have a ton of starting pitching talent on the major league roster right now, and they of course could bring it back, but they're going to try to trade Little already. It sounds like Eflin could be a nice target out there as well. Springs has had his name bandied about, as has Rasmussen. There are going to be some vacancies at the end of this rotation at the end of this year already. You're going to get McClanahan back next year as your number 1, obviously, but you'd like to be able to hit the ground running when you do. Bringing in Roby here, I believe, would help them in the long run, but I do think they do need to add more position player group or more position player talent overall. But this trade here, I do like this one for the Rays. Joe, do you know David Bednar? Would love the Mets to get a guy like him? Absolutely. I've been a big fan of Bednar for the better part of 2 years now. I thought he would have been a great trade deadline acquisition for my Texas Rangers last year. Really would have solidified their bullpen. He's pitching around a 5 ERA right now and has a tough time with the injury bug this year. He's not going to cost a whole lot as compared to normal, but it's still going to be a significant package in return. probably be one of the top 2 or 3 closers that is moved at the deadline this year. If he does get moved, I just don't think the Pirates move him right now because his value is a little bit depressed. As far as the Mets adding to their bullpen, I believe they will add. Now, do I think they'll add significant pieces to that bullpen? Probably not. We're probably talking more low-cost options. Somebody who's not going to cost their top 10 or any of their top 10 prospects in their system. Bednar certainly would cost at least one, probably 2 of those guys, if not more. So, Bednar to the Mets, I would say the chances of that are almost 0. I'm not going to say completely 0 because, you never know what happens with the Pirates. They might surprise us, but I just don't think the Pirates are going to move them. And even if they did, I just don't think the Mets would be willing to pony up the price in prospects to be able to get it done. The more likely option for them is that they're going to throw their checkbook at the problem, buy a closer who's from a team that's not willing to pay that closer anymore, save that team some money, and see if they can help out their bullpen in that way. That's exactly what they did with Phil Maton. They could look to do so again here in the near future. So there's our trade there for the Cardinals. Sarah, I know you didn't comment here with us. I hope you're with us tonight. But if you're unable to watch tonight, please watch the video back. You can check out all our commentary on that perfect trade deadline for the Cardinals. Just to kind of wrap up this Cardinals segment. Does this make them a World Series favorite? No. Is the goal to win the World Series? Sure. Is it a realistic one? No. So this is about getting them better, getting them to be a contender for at least the division here against the Milwaukee Brewers and possibly winning their first round playoff series. That is what this acquisition does for the Cardinals, and that would be a perfect trade deadline for them. I don't think anybody would see them going to the World Series, but hey, nobody saw the Diamondbacks last year. It could be their turn. You never know. Alrighty, we're going to go back to the boards here. One team that we did not do yesterday, I believe, in the NL West, we're going to go do this one fairly quickly here, is the Arizona Diamondbacks. See what you guys are proposing out there. Finnegan as a relief arm makes some sense. There's not too much I could see the Diamondbacks really doing. There's no way they're going to go after Mason Miller. Rooker could be a possibility, though. Tyler Anderson makes some sense. Drew Jones for Nardi, not happening. Fetty makes some sense as a option if they decide to go that route instead of bringing back Montgomery. But Lawler going out, no way that happens. Merrill Kelly not getting moved. Walker not getting moved. Gallen not getting moved. This is the trade we posted the other day, and that's probably where I'm at for the perfect trade deadline. They offload the money of Montgomery next year. They still add a starting pitcher this year in Lorenzen, who has a track record of success and can come out of the bullpen, whereas Montgomery does not usually come out of the bullpen, even though he did in the postseason in the World Series last year for the Rangers. He looked great out of that bullpen, but that was the one and only time he's really done it in his career, in the last several years anyway. Lorenzen, though, has done it a lot more recently, and I think he'd be a great swingman out of the bullpen if the Diamondbacks utilized him in that way, or if they just kept him as a number 4 or number 5 in that rotation. Either way, I think this trade would really solve their money issues next year. Rangers, though, are not willing to eat that money this year. They're going to have to get the Diamondbacks to eat the remaining money on the deal this year. I think the Diamondbacks would be happy to do so just to save the money on next year's money. And so Montgomery to Texas and Lorenzen to the Diamondbacks is going to be my perfect trade deadline scenario for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Could they add a bat? Sure. Could it impact them like a Tommy Pham? Absolutely. But I don't think anybody saw what Tommy Pham did last year as a run-of-the-mill performance. I think everybody realized his impact was more than that. We've seen that on other teams in the past. Remember Ronald Acuna going down a few years ago with, Rosario and Soler coming in to pick up the pieces, and Jock Peterson. They did a great job retooling that outfield on the fly. I think this type of a move here would help a move to help out in their outfield like a Tommy Pham would be a very similar type of move, low cost, that might have paid big dividends, but you can't really count on that, is my point. And so getting somebody to take the money of Montgomery next year probably is the biggest win that the trade deadline that the Diamondbacks could hope for. So that's going to be my perfect trade deadline scenario for the Diamondbacks. We're going to save the Dodgers for just a moment. We're going to go ahead and do the Atlanta Braves. We'll save the best 2 teams in the NL for last. For the Braves, Lane Thomas and Winker to help out in that outfield. I love that idea. Kind of exactly the argument I just talked about. What they did with Soler, Peterson, Rosario, among others. This would be another move in that same vein. Don't really like the idea of giving up AJ here, but kind of a platoon fourth outfielder type like Lane Thomas. Reminds me a lot of Rosario, the way he was required. Winker kind of reminds me a lot of the Jock Peterson type that they brought in. I do like the trade overall, but I wouldn't say that's the perfect trade deadline scenario. But great acquisition nonetheless. Pilar, though, I think would be chef's kiss if you can get him for a price as low as Savalas. I don't think you will. I think you're probably looking a little bit higher. Keller makes some sense there. Tommy Pham as an outfield replacement. I think the price for Pham is actually going to be a little higher than what the Braves might be willing to pony up for. His price is not going to be that of like a top 100, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about a fourth outfielder utility player who's probably not going to play out every day, even when he's at his best. But the impact he had on the Diamondbacks was noticeable and really helped in that clubhouse. I think we could see something very similar here for Pham once again. Bassett, Bichette, Varsho, no, impossible for Bassett there. Kind of like that idea to help out with their rotation. Primarily, the Braves are looking to add to this rotation. You think Braves might look into someone like Kelenic for more outfield help? He's having a decent season in Seattle. What? Kelenic's on the Braves. All right. Let's see here. Jazz, that's not even anything for them. Zach Eflin trade. I like the idea of Zach Eflin. I think the price is too high. I don't think they move Richie. Braves don't have a lot as far as trade assets. So these top end pieces like Crochet, any of those types of players, I don't think they're going to have a prayer to get them. I know there was some off-season smoke around them being in the market for Dylan Cease. And I'm sitting there looking at their farm system. Let me pull it up for you guys right now. I mean, the Braves had probably the best farm system for a long period of time. Right now, that's their top 5. Who are you trading in there that front lines a deal for Garrett Crochet? Who are you trading in that top 5 that front lines a deal for Dylan Cease before the season? None of those guys are. You'd have to trade somebody off of that Major League roster, and I don't think the Braves want to do that because they're already wafer thin on that Major League roster. So bringing in a starting pitcher, absolute need. Just a matter of how they go about it. And then, of course, outfield kind of getting some depth here. So the one move I kind of like is they could call up their old buddy, Ron Washington, and say, hey, yo, we need a starting pitcher. We could use an outfielder. We could use some relief pitching. What do you got for us? Well, my guy, I got you Tyler Anderson for your rotation. I got you Carlos Estevez for your bullpen. And I also got Kevin Pillar for your outfield. That would be a great trade deadline for the Braves. A+ home run. Gets them almost on par with the Phillies. But remember, you're without Strider. You're without Acuna. And I don't think you're going to be able to crack the top 2 in the NL over the Dodgers or over the Phillies either. And you just got to be careful with what you're willing to move. But Anderson would be a good target for them. So let's go ahead and pick the Braves. We're going to pick the Angels. We're going to go over to the Angels. We're going to look at their starting pitching. We're going to look at it on the Major League roster. Tyler Anderson, -1.7. Detmer's valued at 24.8. But again, they don't have a whole lot to trade here. Canning makes some sense. 1 year left on his deal. Hans Kraus has got 3 victories now, I believe, ever since he came over. But he's not going to be impacting the Braves rotation, obviously. The get for me here is Tyler Anderson. Bring him in. Now, remember that speech I just made a couple of different times now about, piling together different assets from the same team. They want to maximize the value for every single one of the pieces that they're going to move. Could you get Tyler Anderson and Pillar and Estevez from the Angels? Absolutely. Are you likely to get them all in the same trade? More than likely not, but we're talking about the perfect trade deadline for the Braves. If they could get them to agree to the deal, I think that would be the biggest impact for them. Ward would make some sense as far as an outfielder. Rengifo is an infield depth prospect or depth piece anyway, but Rengifo has some injury issues, and there's a lot of teams sniffing around his market right now. There's Estevez. I'm going to put him in here, and there's Pilar. Remember, he said he's going to retire after this year, so maybe you just get the last bits of talent out of him. Value coming in 2. Obviously, that value is way too low. But it also doesn't cost a whole lot. You're not going to give up your top 5 in your system. Best case scenario that the Angels could hope for in this type of a trade is just pure quantity, and that's what the Braves have to give. The Yankees love to do that as well. So let's see what we could kind of hobble together here. We're going to go ahead and say the Braves, or the Angels are going to cough up some cash in this deal as well. We're going to say they cough up, say, $6 million of Anderson's contract. Something like that. Simple, but it also beefs up the return that the Angels could possibly acquire. Alright, looking at the Braves system, there's Richie right there, 7.7. I don't want to touch him. I don't want to do Alvarez. I don't want to do Murphy. I want to keep on going here. I want to keep going down. I want to get to this level of player. And honestly, I want to go with Young. So we're going to go with Seth Keller. Starting pitcher, 20 years old, check. I want to go with another starting pitcher. We'll go with Lucas Braun. Check. 2 starters I got coming in. Now I want to get younger. Actually, hold on. I want to take Braun out of here. Where is he? I just saw another pitcher that I like even better. Bauman, the 19-year-old. We're going to get really young here. Junior Garcia. Mario Baez. Mainly, I'm just looking at the youth here and just seeing what could pop. We'll go ahead and do Douglas Glaude as well. All right. Let's just look at the quantity and just see what happens here. Anderson, Estevez, and Pilar. I just threw $6 million in there just to kind of put a number out there. We could take that off, obviously, and put it down to like 2. I'll go ahead and do that for this trade. Add cash. Okay. 3 pieces in exchange for 5. Obviously, if you're trying to acquire 3 different pieces from the same team, like I said, you're going to have to overpay a little bit. Do any of these pieces that the Angels are getting, are any of them surefire all-stars? No. Are any of them surefire major leaguers at this point? No. Which is why you're getting such a quantity of them from the Braves. They're all very young, but this is the type of trade that you could see happening. Estevez has only got, what, a year left on his deal right now, or expiring anyway. Same thing with Pilar. This is going to be his final season. Anderson is under control for 1 more year after this one, but does come with a little bit of money. Getting a little bit of cash to offset his money this year. Well, you're going to have to take the full boat of that deal next year, but he was an all-star this year. He looks great. Looks like the same Tyler Anderson we saw with the Dodgers a couple of years ago, which is a great thing for the Angels, but his value hasn't picked up quite that much. They could still hold on to him until next year or into the offseason. But this is the type of trade that I think would be the perfect trade deadline for the Braves. They're not going to acquire Crochet. They're not going to be hunting for any big game right now. They don't have the prospect wherewithal to do it. This is a team that's ready to compete right now. They have Max Fried, of course, pending free agent. They have Acuna down for the count right now for this year. Strider as well. They need to make some decisions as to whether or not they're going to be the next Atlanta Braves team from a couple years ago who lost their best player and still won the series. This is the types of moves that they did to kind of round out their roster when they did lose him. And so this, I think, would be the perfect trade deadline for the Braves. We'll go ahead and validate. We're going to go ahead and post. We'll get to some of your comments here in just a second. There we go. Go back over to the trade boards. If the Mets do decide to sell, do you think there's a team that would pay a king's ransom for all of their available guys? Some combo of Alonso, Severino, and Bader. One, I don't think they're selling, and if they did, Severino, I think his value is decent. I don't think they would move him, but do I think somebody would pay a king's ransom? I do not. Same thing with Bader. He's not worth a king's ransom. Alonso, I thought this offseason would have been a great player to trade here at the deadline. I don't think there's any pathway right now to an Alonso trade until at the bare minimum next or this coming off season. I don't think they move him at that point either. I think they try to bring in Juan Soto, try to attract players rather than try to see these top end talent pieces leaving their roster. They're looking to make this team better in the offseason through free agency, so they have to keep those types of players around to make them attractive. Cohen just seems to be able to print money and be able to afford whatever he wants. Tax be damned. But we shall see what the Mets decide to do. 10 days away from the deadline, things are about to get crazy. I think after this weekend, we should start to see some movement. Rangers are, of course, in a little bit of a holding pattern until they figure out if they're going to be in a buy or sell stance here at the deadline. I think that Orioles series is going to dictate that quite a bit. So Rangers hoping to take the weekend series anyway from the Orioles. Then you get to the White Sox and Blue Jays and Cardinals. Those teams the Rangers should win and win convincingly. We should see that race start to tighten a little bit, even if they struggle against the Orioles. Should be an interesting week of baseball, and then we should start seeing some trades happen probably around Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. We will be live for you guys on trade deadline day as well. So make sure you guys join us for that. Appreciate you guys taking the time to join us tonight. Let's kind of wrap up our trade deadline, our perfect trade deadline scenarios for some of the top teams out there. All of the contenders we have now done, except for the top two on the NL, the Dodgers and the Philadelphia Phillies. We're going to save the Dodgers for last. We're going to do the best team in the league right now, and that's the Phillies. They're mainly looking for a center fielder, a relief arm, and somebody who can come in at the back end of that rotation. Outside of that, the main thing they're hoping for here at the deadline is going to be health. Hope their guys stay healthy. Hope those guys that are having nagging injuries, soft tissue injuries like Harper and Schwarber, that they are able to get the rest they need down the stretch. To do so, they're going to have to beef up their bench, beef up their bullpen a little bit, maybe add a starter so that those starters are not having to use up all of their bullets during the regular season. We saw how that worked out last year. They looked great last year, and then in the postseason they looked even better. And then they just ran into a little bit of a stall, if you will, against the Diamondbacks. So we'll see what direction they go. But for me, I would like to see them add a number 4 or a 5 type starter. Michael Lorenzen from the Rangers makes a lot of sense, or a John Gray, somebody of that ilk, a low-cost option that's going to come in and eat you 5-6 innings a start every week or two, because he's probably not going to fit into that rotation every single night based on how good that rotation's already been. It's mainly about giving those guys just a day off and having somebody in the long relief role back there that can come in and jump in so that they're not having to burn those bullets from that better pitcher, rather than going after a guy who's more expendable than, say, a Zach Wheeler or an Aaron Nola or anything like that. So let's kind of look at some of these other ideas. Estevez for the bullpen. Pilar, we just kind of did that one. Mason Miller, that would be a great get. I don't think they'd be able to get him, however. It'd be a significant cost. They'd have to mortgage their future. But hey, it's David Dombrowski we're talking about. He doesn't really care about that prospect of the future, nonsense. He wants to win the series year in and year out, and that's what he's holding out hope for. Again, Robert Vierling going back to the Phillies. I think they really miss having him on that roster, but there's no way the Tigers give him back. Rooker and Miller again. Robert again. Pham has been rumored, but unlikely, according to John Heyman and Matt Gelb of the beat reporter for the Phillies as well. Taylor Ward makes some sense. Arozarena, not so much as a center fielder. Doval and Ray, no way the Giants make that move. Ward again, and Devin Williams. Devin Williams not going anywhere from Milwaukee. Ward, like I said, makes a little bit of sense. Let's go ahead and make the trade here for the Philadelphia Phillies. And remember, it's more about adding somebody at the back end of that rotation. Somebody who could, in a pinch, come in and take a spot start or two, or come out of the bullpen in the long relief role. This, to me, screams that the Rangers have a lot of pieces on their roster that they're going to have to figure out spots for. And so you look at this Philadelphia Phillies team. We're going to go with starting pitching. Oop, not that one. There we go. Starting pitching, we're looking in the majors. The one arm I think could really work here is Dane Dunning. I don't think this really excites Philadelphia Phillies fans, and understandably so. But for me, this is the type of arm that gets those guys like Wheeler and Nola an extra day off here and there. They don't have to burn those arms out during the regular season. And I think that the acquisition of another starter like Dunning, who's a very low-cost option, his value is only around 0.9. You get 2 years of control, and he has significant experience as a long man out of the bullpen, and he gets to compete for a series year in and year out in the NL East. Gotta love that idea if you're a Phillies fan from that perspective. But again, it's not a name recognition guy. He's become a little bit more of a strikeout type of artist over the last year rather than a pitch to contact guy, which is what he was a year and a half ago. He's really kind of changed up his way of attacking hitters. And he could be a nice fit as a number 4 or 5 in that rotation next year as well. Does this make them a World Series favorite? No. They're already considered one of the World Series favorites on the NL side. Does this make them incrementally better than the LA Dodgers? Well, they just went into LA and swept them, so they're already better than the Dodgers in my opinion. But the Dodgers have a number of guys on the injured list that they're going to get back. The question is how soon and what condition are those guys going to be in once they're healthy. For the trade though for the Phillies, this is all about depth. It's all about keeping their guys healthy, which is the issue that the Dodgers are having right now. They can't keep their team healthy. And that's, really been the bugaboo of that rotation so far this year. Ohtani, of course, they knew the injury risk when they signed him. But you've had Glass now on the injured list. Seems like he's relatively close to coming back, or it's not going to be a long-term injury anyway. And then you get to the other arms that are injured on that Dodgers team. Kershaw, of course, coming into the year, they knew his injury issues. Walker Buehler, Dustin May's down for the count right now. They have a lot of arms. Yamamoto comes to mind as well. He's going to be out until August at least, so they could use some guys in there that could help out some rotation pieces in there, out there in LA. But for Philadelphia, they could also use some insurance policies to their rotation so that they don't have the same issues that the Dodgers are facing right now due to injuries in their rotation. So I like the acquisition of Dunning here. As far as a bullpen piece, say the Rangers decide to sell Kirby Yates or David Robertson would be great fits in Philadelphia. Robertson, of course, has already played for Philadelphia. I think he would fit like a glove. Let's say the Rangers do decide to sell. Kirby Yates, probably the most valuable. I think that the better piece, though, for the Phillies would be David Robertson, guy who's had a lot of experience playing both in Philadelphia and competing in that ballpark and against those teams on the NL side now. They're saying he has a -8 value for Robertson. I'm sorry. It's primarily because of the money is why his value is slightly low. But he's been absolutely nails, and you saw him play against the LA Dodgers back-to-back games, entered the game in the 8th inning, and strikes out 1, 2, 3. Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani got all 3 of those guys back-to-back games. He looked dominant doing it. He would be the difference maker in a late inning role for a team like Philadelphia. Really like the idea of bringing him in. Now, Rangers already have money committed to those roster pieces, so they would be willing to eat some of the money for those guys on if they decide to sell here. They're not going to have to eat a whole lot. You're probably talking about maximum, say $4 million is what they ultimately decide to eat that they're going to send to Philadelphia to pay off the contract a little bit. 4.1 is the value going out for the Rangers. So what would the Philadelphia Phillies have to give up here to make this type of a deal happen? Rangers, if they decide to sell, they're going to be looking for upper-level minor league talent, so looking for older players who have significant value. Now remember, 4 is about as high as we're going to go, so it's not going to cost a major piece. Klassen makes some sense, though, a 21-year-old starting pitcher. 19-year-old second baseman, 19-year-old shortstop, Saltaban. That's the type of player the Rangers do like. They usually go for even younger. Rangers need to set up more catching. Navas would be a piece there. I like that. Looking at the trades so far, I'm going to go ahead and take out Saltaban. We're going to go even younger here for the Rangers. They could add another catcher in Hentiger. I think they would rather go Alexi De La Cruz. Possibly another starting pitcher, Jose Pena. Actually, I'm going to take him out. I'm going to go even younger. A lot of young catchers here. Gotta like that. Not a whole lot of very young players on this team. We'll go ahead and throw in Arias and just see where we're at. Okay. Dunning and Robertson for 3 really young pieces for the Rangers. If they decide to sell, I like that as a return for Dunning. I do think they could do better for Robertson on the open market. I think Robertson's value on his own is probably worth around 4 with that contract included in that. Robertson, though, according to this site, is only worth negative 0.8 even with his contract. But like I said, he would be a difference maker for the Phillies in the postseason. I like the trade for Philadelphia. I don't think they would be able to get both, but this is about the Philadelphia Phillies and what the perfect trade deadline for them would look like. And to me, this is the perfect trade deadline. Adding to that bullpen, adding to that rotation, keeping their arms fresh as they get to October. And the pieces that they're acquiring here would be able to play significant roles in a postseason team. Dunning into that number 4-5 starter, probably be shifted to the bullpen in case one of their starters didn't have it or due to injury risk, etc. And he's effective in that role as well. Hard to put starters who have never done it before in the bullpen and hope for them to succeed. Dunning has done so. And then, of course, the second piece here, the bigger piece, though, would be David Robertson. Like I said, coming in the 8th inning role would just absolutely fit there in Philadelphia and solve a lot of their problems. Let's go ahead and do Upside Sports Network in the comments. You guys can check out all the trades that we have posted on here if you're curious. And then the last team we're going to do here is the Los Angeles Dodgers. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for that one all night, so I appreciate you guys waiting all this time late on a Friday night. It's already 11:30 Central about. We're going to go down here and look at what the Dodgers, what the fan base is really looking for. For me, the Dodgers need depth in that starting rotation. They need somebody who's been healthy, who has a track record of success and posting every single day. But more importantly, they need to try to win right now a World Series with Shohei, with Yamamoto, with Teoscar Hernandez. All these big-time pieces they brought in the offseason, they spent and spent and spent. Now it's time for that check to pay off. So let's see where fans like the Dodgers to go. Crochet and Robert, I don't think they'll be able to get both, but Crochet makes a lot of sense. And they have the prospect wherewithal more than any other team that's going to be in his market for him, outside of possibly the Baltimore Orioles. Again, Mason Miller, Garrett Crochet, they're another team that I think would be a great fit for Mason Miller. Paredes as a third baseman, really like that idea. He would come in, take the spot of Max Muncy, and kind of be a great fit in that lineup. Crochet again, Pavetta, I don't see that one. Pardon me. Scoball. Jarren Duran is not being moved at all at any point, anytime soon for the Red Sox. Okay. Remember how I said it just a few minutes ago, how the Dodgers, they are probably going to go big for a starting pitcher here. Let's think back to their previous trade deadlines. Manny Machado, Max Scherzer, Trey Turner, they go big at the trade deadline. We're not talking about penny ante pieces. We're not talking about a minor move when they're trying to save money. When they're trying to really compete and win a World Series, they don't go for the Lance Lynn's of the world. They go for the Yu Darvishes. They go for the Trey Turners. They go for the Max Scherzers. Those are the swings that they go for here at the deadline. So we're going to try to come up with the perfect trade for Tarek Skubal. The Dodgers, to me, are the one team out there that is that heavily invested into this season right now with the ability to really kind of take it to the next level by bringing in Skubal. I think he would probably slot into their rotation this year as a number 2 or 3, even though he's probably going to have a Cy Young season in the American League. I think after the trade, though, it'd be a little tough to ask him to be your number 1, especially with the arms that they already have on that roster, especially with Yamamoto and Glasnow coming back. I think he would easily fit in there as number 3. Probably, if he's able to keep up the performance, though, he could easily take the ball in game 1 or 2 of a playoff series. Ohtani, of course, steps in there as their number 1 or 2 next year. But then you're looking at a rotation of Ohtani, Yamamoto, Glasnow, and Skobal. And then you still have Buehler, May, and all those other starters, Kershaw, etc., as depth. That would be an insane rotation, 1 through 5 anyway, depending on which way they go with that 5th spot. But let's see if we can put the perfect trade here for Skobal. We're just going to do a heads-up trade, Dodgers and Tigers. We're going to go over to the Tigers. We're going to pull up the surplus. And, of course, Skobal 105. More than likely, though, his value is probably just a pinch higher, probably around 108. Okay. One idea that I floated earlier this offseason, or this trade deadline season, is about the Tigers trying to offload the money of a Javi Baez as well. They've already sunk so much money into this team, the Dodgers have anyway. If they want the best pitcher in the American League this year, that's Tarik Skobal. They want to bring him to their team and really make a great 1 through 5 rotation. I think he'd be the perfect fit. The kind of a ballast, if you will, could be a Javi Baez in this trade to kind of make it more of a Cole Hamels style return rather than the Juan Soto return for the Nationals. That trade obviously has been panned by so many of the GMs around the league. They're absolutely terrified of giving up that many assets for a year or 2 of a player. Skobal has 2 years left after this one, and I think he would re-sign out there in LA because of how dominant that team is going to be over the next 10, 15 years. He'd be crazy to go somewhere else because that's the place where he could win a ring every single season. All right, so what would it cost the Dodgers? Let's not even put Javi Baez in there. Best value, Will Smith. Obviously, you're not including him. Same with Ohtani, Glasnow. Miller could be a piece. He's had his ups and downs recently. He could be the frontline piece in a trade for a guy like Tarik Skobal. You already have your rotation pretty much set right now if you're the Dodgers, looking at as long as you have pieces that are healthy with Ohtani next year as your number 1. We talked about Glasnow and Yamamoto. That's 1, 2, 3. If you bring in Skobal, that's 4. And then you still have a bunch of other starters that you can go to. Stone, Miller, Buehler, Kershaw, May, among others. But I think you're going to have to at least include one of the 2, Miller or Stone, at the front as the frontline piece in this deal. My guess is they would rather have Miller. So let's go ahead and put him as the number 1 piece going back the other way. Josue De Paula going from the Dodgers to the Tigers would make some sense. Catching, they've got locked up for the next 10 years anyway, so they don't really have a spot for Dalton rushing. He could be a nice piece going back the other direction as well. For a Tarik Skobal, kind of like that idea. Let's go ahead and throw him in there. Value is already up to, 62, but we need at least another 40. So where are we going to find it? Rushing versus Lorenzo. We'll stick with rushing there. Emmett Sheehan, I think, would be a great number 2 starting pitcher prospect in this type of a trade. But we're still 30-something points away here. See how tough it is to really come up with a great package. Even if you included their number 2 piece here in De Paula, that would be about the best trade that you could get, and you'd still have to probably add 1 or 2 minor level or very low level minor leaguers to get them to say yes to this deal. But look at all the major league talent that the Tigers would be getting. Miller immediately goes into the rotation for the Tigers. Same thing for Sheehan. Rushing probably is the catcher, if not the end of this year, probably the starter next year for them, or at some point next year anyway. De Paula would be a great piece for them offensively. And like I said, I still think they could add a couple more pieces as well. Now, instead of doing that, though, let's take out DePaula. We're going to go over to the Tigers. And we're going to include Javi Baez. Now, doing so is probably going to cost them an additional, let's see, how much his money is left on his deal. 83, you got 3 years left on that deal. You're talking roughly $50 million that you'd have to eat on that deal. Let's go ahead and say the Tigers take a little bit of a discount, or the Dodgers take a little bit of a discount on the return for Skobal by attaching Baez here. And there's another way you could do the trade. Looking at it on paper, look at how big of the negative Baez is, and that's with $40 million attached in cash going to the Dodgers as well. This is what I don't like about attaching a negative asset with possibly the best, most premium asset on the market. Really diminishes the return that they could get. And I think if the Tigers are going to move Skobal, it would be smart for them to try to maximize as much as they possibly can out of him. He is the one difference-making piece on that roster that could command a absolutely massive package that could reset their organization. They're a team that's been stuck in the middle the last 4 or 5 years. This is the type of trade that could take them from being a team in the middle to being a team that bottoms out right now and really hits it strong here in a year or two. That would be the ideal game plan if I'm a Tigers fan. I want them to stop being in the middle as far as a team not bad enough to be in the top 4 of the draft, but also not good enough to even make it to the wild card. So Tigers kind of need to get out of that being in limbo state, if you will, and attaching Baez I don't think helps them in any way, shape, or form as far as getting the best return. So we'll go back to this part of the trade here. We're up to 77 right now with the 3 pieces coming in. We need to add roughly another 30 here. And we're going to try to do this a little bit differently. We're not going to try to do it in one piece here like we did with DePaula. We're going to try to split this up. We're going to go with Vargas, the shortstop. We're going to go Quintero, the outfielder. And George, the outfielder. Now, this site really limits you to 6 pieces coming back in return, but look at that trade value there versus what you would have gotten with Javi Baez. You still get Miller, you still get Sheehan, that's your starters that go into the rotation immediately. Miller probably slots in there as their number 2 or 3. Sheehan probably as their number 4. Rushing, probably going to be their catcher here in the next year or two. And then you get 3 guys that you can really wish upon if you're the Tigers that allow you to still bottom out while those guys develop. And when those guys are ready to hit the major leagues, the pieces that they're going to draft with the draft assets they're going to get over the next couple of years, that'll all be timed as they all hit the major league level as one big wave. Major league front offices like to have all their prospects hit the majors at one time. That way it comes as a wave, and they can really change their fortunes rather quickly. They can invest in free agency because all those guys are going to be cheap because they are all homegrown guys. They're all going to be low-cost, cost-controlled, team-controlled contracts anyway for the first 3 years while they're on the Major League club, which allows the team to kind of save money and go into free agency to spur their development, bring in some veterans to make that team a little bit better. Things to kind of keep in mind at the deadline when you're looking at big-time assets like Skobal that could be moved. Let us know in the comment section what you think about this trade. I'm going to go ahead and post this one. I'm going to tinker with this one a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to put another $8 million on this one. I'm not saying that they're going to add $8 million to this total. Oh, wrong team. Too far. There we go. To the Dodgers. $8 million. Okay. The reason why I'm doing it is because I want to see this total value jump up just a little bit. Because I think that would allow them to get a little bit better prospect than any one of these bottom 3. So we're going to go back over to the Dodgers. We want to look at familiarize ourselves with where we're at. Quintero, 18 years old, 8.9. I'm going to go ahead and add him in here anyway. Vargas there. And then we're going to add one more piece. Cartaya's really seen his value drop a little bit over the years. He would be one of the pieces I would be looking at. Freeland makes some sense. Let's look at the Dodgers prospects real quick and just see who's who anyway. Rushing currently would be their number 1 AA player. What kind of year is he having right now? 262. Little bit of pop in that bat. OPS 823. Okay. DePaula is at high A, 267, 820. River Ryan, 2.2. Nice strikeout rates. Not too many pieces here. Jackson Ferris, did they just acquire him? Second round pick 2 years ago by the Cubs. Hold on, what was his numbers again? A 4 ERA. Okay, let's go back over to this trade real quick. Freeland, I want to look at his numbers real quick. Don't see him. Okay. Freeland as a third base person. I don't think they'll let me do this. Remember, you can only add 6 players, so that's the problem. We're going to go ahead and take the 8 out. I guess this is probably the best trade I could concoct or could come up with here. The only other way I could do better, if I take out... I don't think you'd be able to get Miller, Rushing, Sheehan, and DePaula. That'd be their top 2 prospects and 2 of their best young pitchers right now. I don't think they could do that. But I do think this is probably enough to get Scoball, or at least darn close. Let's go ahead and take out Quintero. We're going to take out George. We're going to put DePaula in here. Add the cash back in. And there's our trade. Let's validate. And it seems to be fair. Overall, 5 prospects or pieces, young pieces for the future. You're getting the number 1 and 2 prospects from the Dodgers. You're getting 2 starting pitching pieces that are already experienced in the majors. Miller easily fits in there as their number 2 or 3. Sheehan easily fits in there as their number 4. Rushing, the catcher of the future there, or first baseman. Vargas, a good young piece that they can wish upon. And then DePaula, who's another good young piece, but has a lot of talent that the Tigers could really use. But like I said, this would be the type of trade that would allow the Tigers to bottom out a little bit and allow those young guys to develop and hit the majors at the exact same time. All right, we're going to go ahead and post this one to the trade board, and we're going to discuss how this is the perfect trade deadline for the Dodgers. All right, let's look at the trade itself. What does this do for the Dodgers? Well, the Dodgers are currently the second best team in the NL, but they're still considered one of the favorites out there for the World Series. Anything can happen, obviously, in a postseason series, but you want to give your best chance to be able to win that series every single time. If Ohtani was healthy right now, he probably takes the ball in Game 1. Same with Yamamoto in 2, Glass now in 3. They have a great rotation already. Tarek Skobal, I believe, takes it to another level when you consider that every single day you have an ace on the mound. You hear about them refer to it as a win day. Every single time you have an ace on the mound, the team calls it win day because he's the streak buster. He's also the losing streak buster. He's also the one that gets a new win streak started. That's how teams view a true ace. And with this acquisition, the Dodgers don't have just one ace, but they have at least four that could be the number one in almost every single team out there, and they would have all of them on their roster. This would be a team going into next year that I believe would challenge for the best record ever in Major League Baseball history by bringing in Tarik Skubal. Now, of course, they're going to still add in free agency. I believe after this year, they're going to be a good team, a very good team for the entirety of Ohtani's run in Major League Baseball. All right, Jose, appreciate you joining us once again. Who do you think is the best GM currently right now? Based off of last year, I would have said Chris Young, but he's got a lot of roster constraints right now, money constraints. I'm going to say Chris Young with an asterisk, mainly because I'm going to set him to the side. I'm not going to say he's the best right now, but last year it certainly was him. Currently, based on the information that we have at the moment, I would say the best one, has an argument for it anyway, has got to be A.J. Preller in San Diego. And why do I say that? You trade away Juan Soto. Nobody expects you to really bottom out as a, terrible team or whatever. But you know that the writing was on the wall that this team was going to take a major step back. But then you go right back out there after that Juan Soto trade in which you got a starter in there. You turn around and bring in Luis Arraez and Dylan Cease. Those are big-time acquisitions that say, "Hey, I'm not I'm not just a fly-by-night operation. I just want to keep this thing rolling. And just because we trade Juan Soto doesn't mean we're going to be going into the lottery or anything like that. We want to win, and that's what A.J. Preller said. Dombrowski's got to be in that argument for the Philadelphia Phillies. The way he's been able to find some talent out there. Dodgers, I'm not even sure who the guy is. What's his name? Sam Fuld? Is that the GM there now? Under Friedman, he's got to have an argument because of the wherewithal to get those deals done. Was absolutely fantastic to get those free agent contracts signed. He would have to be in that argument. A guy who's not going to be in this argument is Farhan Zaidi. He's going to be on the way out here within the next month. Best wishes to him and wherever he decides to go after this year. But he should not be a member of that front office. They need a changing of the guard there so they can try to lure some of this top flight talent that's out there in this year's free agent class. But looking at the trade itself here, does this make it a perfect trade deadline for the Dodgers? Absolutely. Why? They get the best starter on the market. And I'm not just saying, hey, he's got a 3.5 ERA, he's the best starter by default. He is truly that good of a starting pitcher where he very well could win the American League Cy Young right now. He is that dominant of a pitcher this year. And to bring him in and still keep all your other pieces on the Major League roster, aside from expendable arms that you have at the back end of that rotation, when you consider the money that's already spent on the starters in their rotation. They got Yamamoto signed up long-term, Ohtani, they've got Glasnow all signed up, Kershaw's on a one-year deal, but Scobal's got 2 years left after this one, if they make that deal. That's 4 aces right now already in that rotation for next year, and it's only going to get better from there for the Dodgers. They're going to add this offseason once again, but I really like this trade deadline for the Dodgers. They get the best arm on the market, solidifies them at least as the second best team in the NL. And if they get Tarik Skubal, this I believe would elevate them over the Philadelphia Phillies in a 7-game series because he's going to start probably Game 2 or Game 3 right now, and he is a difference maker in those types of settings. So really like Skubal. I think the Tigers absolutely need to get something done. Coral, is Skubal actually available realistically? I don't believe so. Honestly, the price here, look at the price. You're giving up Miller, Sheehan, Rushing, DePaula, and Vargas, and that gets you close to the value? I mean, I told you guys the other day anyway, something they might have to do is get somebody to give him a Cole Hamels type package and take the money of Baez. That way they could at least lower the cost a little bit, reset their financial tables a little bit, and still acquire talent. I told you guys that was a possibility. We just showed how bad or how much that diminishes the value, though, of Skubal, and I don't think that's a realistic possibility either. But the Dodgers are a team that's full bore trying to win the World Series this year. He is the best pitcher that could be on the market this year. And then for that reason, I think this is a dream, the perfect deadline scenario here for the Dodgers. But to answer your question, Coral, I really don't think that that's a very realistic possibility, but it would be the perfect trade deadline for a team like the Dodgers. Let us know what you think of the trade in the comments. Appreciate you guys joining us once again tonight. We're going to take the weekend off for you guys. We might post a video or two if something major happens. But we'll be live with you guys again late Monday night. I've got a big week next week. Monday will be the only night during the week that we will have a live. And then at the end of the week, we might have a live for you guys on Saturday just to recap what's happened throughout the week. We might even have some videos coming out for you guys during the week in a short video format, a minute or less. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN. Whenever we do post a video, if you don't get the alert on it for whatever reason, because YouTube only allows you 3 alerts per day, we might not be one of the alerts that they send you from one of the many people that you're subscribed to here on YouTube. So make sure you follow us over there on X. Go over to X, follow us at UpsideSN. You will be notified. Just turn on your alerts for us, and you will be notified when we post a video, when we go live. You can send us a direct message, any of those things. Really do appreciate those of you who've joined us over the last couple of years. Gained a few subscribers this past week, and really have enjoyed getting back into the swing of things with you guys. It's been a lot of fun talking baseball. We're going to have some great fun with the trade deadline next week, and especially during the deadline week itself. We are going to be live for you guys quite a bit. So make sure you guys join us again on Monday for MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate y'all joining us. Y'all have a great evening.